So, Trevor, this is a really interesting matchup in a lot of ways because in the title the show, I basically said this is a get-right opportunity for Notre Dame. And as a team, this is a get-right opportunity overall, but as we just spent 30 minutes talking about. But this is especially true on the offensive side of the ball. So there's kind of three parts to the team, right? There's the overall team, and then there's like the defense and what they do, and then there's the offense and what they do. And like the team as a whole has a lot to prove. The defense is just kind of like, guys, just keep doing what you're doing, right? Like, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. But the offense is like, you got to figure stuff out, because I wrote this long article on Saturday or Sunday just pointing out like all the chaos that's going to happen in college football. Like, it's impossible. People are like, oh, there's going to have all these one-loss teams. I'm like, guys, it's not possible to have that many one-loss teams because Georgia already lost a game, because Bama already lost a game, because Tennessee already lost a game, because Ole Miss lost a game, and everybody but Georgia lost to a team that nobody really had on the bingo card as losing to that team. Who had them Ole Miss losing at home to Kentucky preseason? Who had Bama losing to Vanderbilt in the preseason? Not a lot of people had Tennessee losing at Arkansas when we saw how good Tennessee was. You might have had it before the season, but once Tennessee came out and was, smacking people, goes on the road, beats Oklahoma, who's like, oh, yeah, they're going to beat Arkansas. And they're going to have their quarterback get knocked out of the game, Arkansas, and their backup quarterback is going to lead you down for the game winner, right? I mean, there's so many things that happen. Just like, yeah, I didn't see that one coming. You know what I mean? And if it's not for the ACC being like, hey, guys, we got to do whatever possible to make sure we've got two teams that are eligible for the college football playoff. If that means we got to screw over teams in our conference like Virginia Tech and Cal, we're going to do it with that non-targeting call and linemen blocking at the 1 yard line on a pass thrown from the 5, whatever. But the point is, but that's a Cal team that should not be in competition with Miami, right? Like that's but that's how football works, man. And so the point of it all was like, there's so much chaos is going to happen, guys. Notre Dame's got a great path in front of them. ... Big capital B, big capital U, big capital T. But Notre Dame's got to handle their business. And what's going to keep Notre Dame from handling its business is an inconsistent offense that struggles to be balanced enough to make you feel good about them going. And I mean, there's a lot of Notre Dame fans in the chat in the article, which again, I don't understand why everyone's like, some people's first response is to go negative. And like, there's a guy in the chat right now somebody said Leonard Moore played great, and immediately he starts tearing down Leonard Moore and saying, well, Benjamin Morrison played better. And I asked, well, who said otherwise? Well, no one. So your response to someone praising Leonard Moore was to talk about, oh, he gave up this, he gave up that, he's not as good as Benjamin Morrison. Well, who said he was? He's still really good, right? It's like some people go negative, but at the same time, you can say like, yeah, I get it. I don't know that Notre Dame is playing well enough offensively, consistently enough to say I have confidence they're going to go win their next 7 games. And if you do think that they're doing that, that's kind of the fan in us kind of saying that it's more wishful thinking than it is an evaluation of what Notre Dame has done. So this side of the ball has the most to prove. This side of the ball is a situation where if they play better, this team becomes really hard to beat. Because through 5 games, despite the fact I would argue that Notre Dame has already played 2 of their 3 toughest opponents already. Now, that doesn't mean the second half of the schedule is easy by any stretch, because Army's undefeated, Navy's undefeated, Georgia Tech's 4-2 in a quality football team, USC's 4-2 in a quality football team. Both of those games are on the road. Virginia's 4-1. They're coming off of a 10-point win over BC, who was ranked for a time this season. So the schedule's not easy. So even though I would say you've played 2 or 3 of your best opponents, there's a lot teams better than Purdue and Miami and Northern Illinois left on the schedule, right? So if they're going to consistently play to a high level and run the table, the offense has to play better. That's just right there, Trevor, like big picture, this side of the ball coming out of the break has to play a lot better. They don't have to be 40-plus points a game every week. They've got to play better. They've got to be more balanced. That's numero uno when talking about this football team. If Notre Dame's in the playoff at the end of the season, it's because the offense coming out of the bye gets better. If it doesn't, then I have a feeling they're going to stub their toe again against somebody. And that's the first thing that's kind of what's at stake this weekend, or what are we going to learn? We're going to learn a lot about this Notre Dame offense because they need to get going.
They need to start taking the necessary steps to become, I don't even want to say an elite offense. This doesn't have to be a 2019 LSU offense that can go and score 49 points a game on any given opponent. Would I be upset if that happened? Obviously, absolutely not. But here's the thing. The thing that I'm going to be looking to see overarching and what's going to make Notre Dame a more balanced football team, and it's all about consistency. In every game that they've played so far this season, Notre Dame has shown flashes, but heavy emphasis on flashes. They've had a really good drive here or a really good quarter here, but it's not enough once you start thinking grand scheme of who Notre Dame has left on their schedule, one, and two, who they're going to inevitably meet in the playoff. So you can't go on a 2.5 quarter scoring drought against teams in the playoffs. That's just not going to happen, right? So Notre Dame has to find a way to become a more balanced offense, to your point. They have to learn how to be a more effective team on both sides. I think it's really easy to say, well, they just have to pass better. Sure, I agree with that 100%. They also need to be more efficient with how they run the ball. A workload is going to have to be taken off of Riley Leonard if he's going to sustain for the rest of the season. They're going to have to get more creative in the run game. So offensive line is going to have to improve. So by no means is Notre Dame's offense a finished product, but what does give me confidence is those flashes are starting to become a little bit more prevalent in each game, hoping that the bye week this week really elevated this team. Some light bulbs got turned on in that offensive room, and they really start humming here over this next 3-game stretch, Bryan.
It's going to have to happen. I mean, that's the thing is if they don't, this team isn't going to be who they need to be. Now, listen, coming out and dominating Stanford isn't okay. Like, let's say they come out and let's just say the offense just is rolling in this game, right? Just come out fast. They're going to execute key number one because here's a little preview of Thursday. I'm a spoiler alert. The number one key for the offense is going to be start fast. I know this is going to shock some of you, right? But let's say they come out and they start fast. I mean, it's 28-3 at halftime, and they just bury them in the second half, and it's 56-10. It's like another Stanford, Purdue type of game. Does that mean problem solved? No, because they scored 59 offensive points against Purdue, right? And they rolled them, and they did all those things. And then the next week they kind of sleepwalk through the Miami game. But it's a step in the right direction. That's the key. It's a step in the right direction because you are playing, let's be honest, right? Let's just keep it real, folks. This is not a very good Stanford defense. And Trevor, we were kind of looking at these numbers before we get started. It's even worse on offense, but these are the stats and the rankings of Stanford coming into this game. They rank 89th in points per game on defense, 72nd in total yards, 102nd in yards per play. They rank 122nd in passing yards allowed, 112th in yards allowed per attempt, 107th in yards per completion, 115th in passer rating, 97th in sacks. They're 91st in third down defense. They're 84th in red zone defense, and they're 75th in turnovers gained. So not only do they get moved on, they don't really force any turnovers. And one of the turnovers they had that they forced against Clemson was just a terrible read by the quarterback. Klubnik threw a go ball with like the corner just like right in the seam, and I'm like, I don't understand why you're throwing that football. But things like that can happen. They happen to all quarterbacks. But when you look at this football team, Trevor, and you say like they compete hard, they play hard, but this is just not a really talented football team. And by the way, they rank 84th in red zone defense. They rank 91st in red zone touchdown defense. So this is one area where they're pretty good is they're actually a pretty decent rushing team. And they rank 12th in the country in fewest rushing yards allowed and 26th in yards allowed per rush. They are only 74th in tackles for loss. So you'd say, well, the rushing overall number of 12th can be skewed because teams throw on. I mean, they're one of the worst teams in college football in throw and pass defense. So maybe it's just because teams don't try to run on them. Well, maybe, but they're 26th in yards allowed per rush, despite ranking 97th in sacks and 74th in tackles for loss, which means they're not creating a lot of negatives. So for them to be 26th in yards allowed per rush, it's actually a pretty quality number. And that's what Notre Dame does best. And so when you look at this matchup, Trevor, and you say, okay, well, Stanford's pretty good at stopping the one thing that Notre Dame does well. To me, Trevor, that's another reason why I do think this game is so important for Notre Dame. Whoops, don't mean to have that up. Is because of that. I don't know why it does that sometimes. It's like I'll open something up and it just immediately goes to my other thing. So I'm trying to pull up the depth chart here for Stanford. So that's kind of where I'm at, Trevor, is like this game is going to be a very telling game for us because, in a lot of ways, but it really starts, in my opinion, with the pass game. And can the Notre Dame pass game get going? I mean, that's really, I mean, just huge. And I would argue this, if you can't get your pass game going in this game, I don't know when it happens. I mean, look, you're going into week 6. You're coming out of a bye. You're rested. You're going to be fresher. You've got a chance to shore up some things on your offensive line from a production standpoint. Your receivers have a chance to kind of get in the film room, look at things. Your quarterback. If you can't get right against a team that ranks 122nd in pass defense, 112th in yards allowed per attempt, 107th in yards per completion, 115th in rating, I don't know when you're going to get right. And so that to me is like, if you dominate them through the air, Trevor, it doesn't mean you're going to continue to do it. But if you don't dominate them in the air, and I don't even mean throwing for 350 yards, just be really good at it. You know what I mean? If Riley Leonard goes 12 of 15 for 240 yards and he's out by the middle of the okay, fine. They don't throw for 300 yards. It's not about that. It's about look good throwing football. Protect the quarterback against a team that ranks 97th in sacks, right? Per game sacks. Be able to protect him. Be able to get open against a secondary that's very mediocre. And a scheme that creates a lot of blown coverages if we're talking about it. So this is one of those things, Trevor, where if Notre Dame's offense can't get going in this game, we're just going to have to come out of it and basically say, this is who they are, folks. Just prepare yourself. This is kind of who they are. I don't know that the light's going to go on against some team down the road. This is just kind of who they are.
Yeah, Brian, I think you nailed it. First and foremost, what the stats tell me, one, is yes, on paper, Stanford is a good rush defense, seeing where their ranking is in yards per game. I will say I looked at it to give a little bit of context here. They allowed, I think, 25 yards to Cal Poly on the ground and 26 yards to Syracuse on the ground, which helped those numbers out. They gave up 150 to Clemson and 136 to Virginia Tech. So
let me just give some proper context to that, just because you're spot on. Those numbers are accurate. However, they held Clemson to 150 yards, right? Or they gave up 150 yards against Clemson, 5.0 yards per play. The 2 games before, Clemson rushed for 252 against App State and 269 against NC State, 7.4 and 8.2 per carry. And then last week against Florida State, they ran for 265 and 6.6 yards per carry. So, like, to me, that does kind of impact it a little bit. Like, okay, yeah, 150 is still a decent amount, but Clemson's been running on everybody so far this year. You know what I mean? And that would be kind of my only somewhat pushback. And like you said, they held Virginia Tech to 136, and Virginia Tech is about there. They've been 243, 153, 165 in the 3 games before. So that one's kind of on par. But that Clemson game actually in context was pretty good. But your point about it is still true, however, that they held Cal Poly to 25, they held Syracuse to 26, and they held TCU to only 104. So they have had some very good moments. But last 2 weeks they've played better rushing teams. They've given up more yards, but it's still the most they've given up all year is 150 against Clemson.
100%. I think I appreciate the context added to the context. So it always helps. But when I look at those numbers, first and foremost, is Notre Dame, it would almost be a cardinal sin, no pun intended with Stanford Cardinal here, but it'd almost be a cardinal sin to not take advantage of what those numbers look like for Stanford as a passing defense, right? This game I'm going to look at a lot as a benchmark for Notre Dame's passing offense because, Brian, to your point, if they can't pass against this team, it's going to look real fuzzy going into the rest of the year, right? Because now Notre Dame's offense is coming up to a point where they are kind of running out of games to say, oh, well, they're still coming into their own. And I think you and I brought it up in some shows a couple of weeks ago, is at some point that timeline is going to run out. They can't be going into Virginia week saying, hey, if they learn how to pass, this is going to be a dangerous offense.
Like, God, I hope we're not having that conversation, Trevor.
Right. Really and so it's just, you have to look at this. And I think you said it perfectly. A lot of people are going to get tied up in the stats. And a lot of people go, oh, sure, they opened up the pass game. Riley Leonard went for 225 yards. It's like, well, one, I don't think he has had a game over 200 yards passing.
Hasn't got to 200 yet. In fairness, he had 112 at halftime against Purdue, and he didn't play in the second half.
Right.
But your point stands.
And if Notre Dame isn't able to pass against the Stanford defense, it's just going to be a gloomy outlook for the rest of the season. If Riley Leonard ends the half, because if Notre Dame can come in and beat this Stanford team like we believe that they should, Riley Leonard, I firmly believe, is not going to see a ton of minutes in the second half of this game. I'm not saying that they're going to come in and beat Stanford like what they did to Purdue, but Notre Dame has shown that they have the ability to do that. So going to be interesting to see how the game plan goes out on Saturday, because if Notre Dame has a game plan in the first quarter, in the first half, similar to what they had against Louisville, Notre Dame rattled off 21 straight points on 3 consecutive drives against the Louisville defense, who is better than the Stanford defense. So going to be really interested to see how it all plays out on Saturday.
Trevor, I think your point is to clarify your point. Tell me if you agree with this statement. Notre Dame, with the offense they are going into the next break, what they are from Stanford through Navy will tell us who they're going to be for the remainder of the season. That's how I feel, because we're now game 6. This is the midpoint of the season, and you've had a bye. You've been tested. If there's no growth now, okay, now you're at that point where, okay, over the next 2 weeks, if there's no growth, this is just who you are. And it's up to the Notre Dame coaching staff to figure out ways to get that figured out. And just keep doing what you're doing and hopefully you get better at it is not the only answer. Now, that's partially true. You do need to get better at things that are there. There are plenty of pass calls that they've made where the receivers are open and the quarterback's looking at it and he gets sacked. Or at least he gets hit and he's got to rush a throw. Or the quarterback doesn't make the right read, or he makes the right read and he misses. He makes the right read and makes a good throw and it gets dropped. There's just been this comedy of mistakes, this comedy of errors that have kept this pass offense from getting going. But there's still a lot of things from a coaching standpoint that need to get better as well. And if we come out of this bye with this extra time off and they haven't cleaned any of that stuff up, then it's just kind of like, okay, they're not willing to do what it takes to win. Because what I don't want to see them do is just come out of this game and say, okay, we're just going to ground and pound, run for 250 yards, throw for 130, and just no. That's basically limiting yourself. You're playing a team that has one of the worst pass defenses in college football. If you don't even try to throw the ball against them, then you're basically punting on the season. We're just going to be as good as we can be, and we're not a championship team, and we're punting on the season. And I think that's a mistake. That's a big mistake. And I'm not saying they're going to do that. I'm just saying, but like over these next 3 games, we're going to find out, in my opinion, who Notre Dame is on offense. Now, we know what they have been. And what I mean by what they are on offense, it's not that like, okay, forget what we saw the first. No, I'm saying if they are still that team, that's just kind of who they are.
Sure.
We have seen teams through 5. I mean, you go back to Marcus Freeman's first year as defensive coordinator. I thought through the first 5 games, they were very up and down. Looked good at times, looked good at times against Florida State. And then at times you're like, what are you doing? Looked good at times against Toledo. And then you're just like, why'd you let them back in that game? By game 6, 7, they kind of started to figure things out. I think the second half against Virginia Tech was a little bit weird, but that team started to figure some stuff out. And, they were really good down the stretch again, of November. But you started to see some growth at times into that. And they actually, I think, got good later than what I'm expecting this offense to do. But the point is, You see that from time to time with good teams where you're young on one side of the ball. You have a lot of new starters, new faces, new coordinator, and it might take you a little bit of time to kind of get rolling. But eventually you get there. And that's my point is it doesn't dismiss what we saw the first 5 games. It's just saying, like you said, if there's growth over the next 3 weeks, then I will say that this offense is going to end up being pretty good, or like at least somewhat dangerous, because you're playing the number, Stanford, 122nd in pass defense this week. Next week against Georgia Tech, you're playing a team that's 83rd in pass defense and has given up 10 touchdowns and only picked off 1 pass all season. And then you play a Navy team that ranks 94th in pass defense. So if you can't figure out your pass defense over these next few games, Trevor, then it's just you come to grips with the fact that this is just who Notre Dame is. And that's not, honestly, for me, that's not a place where I want them to be. Virginia, same thing. Florida State's not a very good pass defense. They're 76th. Army ranks 30th. They're actually pretty good. But Virginia ranks, let's see here, they're in the hundreds as well. Virginia ranks 119th in pass defense. And then USC ranks, where are they? They're 13th. So in the next 7 games, you played 2 teams that rank higher than 75th in pass defense. Yeah. There's no excuse not to get that part of your team going. None. And that's what we're gonna find out about this team. Northern Illinois ranks 22nd. Miami, Ohio ranks 56th. Texas A&M ranks 57th. And these aren't great numbers. Louisville ranks 53rd. Purdue ranks 46th. All 5 teams that they've played so far rank higher than all but 2 of the final 7 teams that they play. And Stanford is the worst of all of them statistically. So it's kind of make or break time for this offense. It's time to figure it out. And that, to me, is the biggest what's at stake moment for this offense is can you get that part of your game going? Because what I don't want to see is this lazy, well, we think we can run on them, and so we're just going to that run on them. That's who you are. You need to run the football. I'm not saying come out and empty and throw, but you need to be able to have a legitimate passing offense that's willing to be efficient and explosive. Not just complimentary football, but be aggressive with it. And so those are aspects of it that I want to see is, you've got to get this part of your game going, and it's got to start this week against Stanford.
I think it's fair to say that Notre Dame can take a really big step forward in their passing game against the Stanford defense, and also say that it is not a finished product by any means. I think both can be true, right? So, yeah, Bryan, to the point that you and I are both making is these next 3 games, and it starts with the Stanford game on Saturday, got to see Notre Dame open up the passing game, because if not, they will just be a run-first team, and Riley Leonard will maybe pass for 165 yards a game, which we are starting to get into the latter portion of the season now, where we can start having the discussions around that's just not going to work in the playoffs. That might not work when you go and travel out and play USC in the Coliseum. That's, so there are going to be things that we are all going to be looking for when Notre Dame plays Stanford on Saturday, because they have 3 really good opportunities back to back to back to start to open up that passing game. And some of it is going to be the eye test. I know that there's a lot of like statistic fanatics out there that will only go and look at the stat sheet. It's like, well, Bryan, Trevor, you said that they're going to open up the passing game, and Riley Leonard went 13 of 17 for 206 yards and 3 touchdowns. It's like, yeah, in a half of football. And that's fantastic. He has yet to eclipse 200 yards in 4 quarters of football. I will be thrilled if he does it in 2 quarters of football, right? So there's steps that they have to take in order to move forward. So we're going to see if they do that. I know there's more facets to it than just can Mike Denbrock scheme up a better play and can Riley Leonard throw the ball better, which I know we're going to dive into throughout this week, and it's going to be an ongoing conversation for us realistically as of right now for the rest of the season until proven otherwise. So excited to get into it with you, Bryan.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And look, I'm not trying to get in this Riley Leonard conversation again, but the reality is it's there's a lot of very I don't say shallow analysis of the pass game, and it's all Riley Leonard's fault. And then Riley Leonard he's not accurate. I'm like, okay, he's only completing 69% of his throws the last 3 games, but whatevs. Let's just say it's not because he's not accurate enough and hang on to 2 really bad throws against Miami Ohio. Just pretend that he, that's just the case. He's not going to figure it out. He's Brandon Wimbush. Like if Brandon Wimbush would have completed 60% of his passes in 2017, Notre Dame doesn't lose a game. Or if he completes 69, like Riley Leonard's currently completing in his last 3 games, and he's 65% on the season. Okay, right. That Notre Dame doesn't lose to anybody in 2017. They're not that team. Riley Leonard's got to get better. There's no question he's got to get better. The receivers have to get better. There's no question they have to get better. Now I'm going to have some articles breaking that down, but at the end of the day, this really starts up front. And if you go back and watch the Louisville game, there were plays where they're doing quick game, Trevor. Quick game, catch and throw. And he's catching and he's throwing and he's getting hit as he's throwing the football. And you're watching him throw off of his back foot because, again, the pressure just keeps coming. And it's not 5, 6, 7, 8-man pressures. It's 4 a lot of times, 5. And if the offensive line can't get that figured out, then that ultimately is going to be the thing that dooms this offense. Because if I go out there and let's say Mike Denbrock was like, Driscoll, come to my office and we're going to sit here and we're going to game. And he and I come up with all these great pass plays, right? And in the middle of our conversation, Sean McVay and Matt LaFleur walk in and they help us design some pass plays. And we come up with all these great pass plays. And Riley's executing in practice and the receiver's getting open. And you get to the game and he's getting pressured like he's gotten pressured the last 3 games. It won't matter. It won't matter. And so that's the other thing that they got to figure it out. And there's these excuses about, well, they're down. I get that they're down 3 starters, and 2 of the starters they're down, they replaced with starters from last year. You're not replacing seniors with sophomores. You replace sophomores with seniors. Right? And it's their simple things that they're not doing right. They're not doing simple things. If you're a scholarship offensive lineman at Notre Dame, I don't care if you're a freshman through senior, I don't care who you are. If you're a scholarship offensive lineman at Notre Dame, you should be taught how to pick up a twist. You should know how to handle a double-edged pressure in quick game. Take the inside, seal the inside gap first. Quarterback takes outside gap. That's football 101 stuff that they're not handling. So, yes, they're not as talented as they should have been. But I see teams that have players that aren't nearly as good as Rocco Spindler and Pat Coogan protect their quarterback better than what Notre Dame has done with those guys in their starting lineup. That's just a fact. And so it's up to Coach Rudolph and to Mike Denbrock to sit there and say, hey, listen, y'all need to figure this out. We need to figure this out. Let's get this coached up right. Because, look, Anthony Knapp's going to lose some reps. He's a freaking true freshman who's not 300 pounds. He's going to get beat sometimes. You can't compound that with protection mistakes. That's my thing. Look, Rocco Spindler's going to get beat a couple times. Pat Coogan's going to get beat a couple times. That's part of football. And if one guy's getting beat like that, but he's still competing, Riley Leonard goes off because that's when he takes off scrambling. When Rocco gets beat and Rocco just rides the guy, Riley sidesteps and either throws it or takes off running. And it's a big play. What can't and we saw this against Miami, Ohio, and get called for holding, and he shouldn't have held, but because he didn't need to hold. What's the play where Sam Pendleton just gets beat around the outside? And, he holds the guy. I didn't think it was the holding was early in the play. He didn't hold him when he went, and then Riley makes the guy miss, and everybody's got a body on the body. He takes off running, picks up almost the first down. If you get beat and you got a body on the body, Riley can do something with that. What you can't have is run-throughs because you didn't block the twisting defensive end who's now coming up the middle with a free run at the quarterback. That's harder to stop. What you can't do as a quarterback is when I'm throwing catch and throw and an inside pressure runner blitzer gets let through, and as I'm here, I'm getting drilled, and I can't get the ball out to Bo Collins on a quick out throw. Like, that has to get cleaned up. 100%. If that is all that changes, this pass offense will be better, without question. Now, will it be good enough to compete in the play? No, there's other parts that have to get better. Like, it's not only on the O-line. The receiver's got to play better. Riley Leonard's got to play better. He's progressing in the offense. He's going through his reads better. Still work to be done, right? But that's been the kind of the great, it's the kryptonite to all those other improvements from happening. And that to me is the thing I hope that they spent the most time working on, is just throwing a bunch of stuff, because Stanford's going to know, hey, we can't sit back here and just play base defense against Notre Dame. We can't. We're going to have to attack and try to create some negatives and go at them that way. And if they can pick it up, I think this offense goes off. If Riley's struggling to get into any kind of rhythm because of the way that the pressure's happening, then this is going to be another unnecessarily competitive game. It's as simple as that. And for a beat-up football team, it would be great to have a bye and then a game where you maybe only play half the game, and then 2 games that are going to be competitive, and then another bye. All of a sudden, you're going to that 4-game November stretch pretty fresh. And hopefully they can kind of get to that point in time. So, those are all aspects of it, Trevor, where if they can protect up front, this offense is going to be better in the pass game. And then if they can make the improvements beyond that, which we've talked about, but that's the biggest thing is you're playing a defense, Trevor, that ranks 97th in the country in sacks.
Yep.
This is not a team that's good at putting pressure on the quarterback. So it's even more problematic if this is a week where you're giving up pressures. Very problematic for me.
Well, and what they're doing right now as an offense to combat, I don't want to say an ineffective pass protection scheme, but I think subpar is a pretty accurate description. What they're doing right now to combat that is not a sustainable form of football to get you continuous wins and go on a win streak and become the offense that you can be with the skill that you have at certain positions. The rollouts and the sprint outs are good early, but that can't be your entire passing scheme. Brian, to your point, there were too many free rushers on Saturday. As a quarterback, you played the position, I played the position. Pressure up the middle is the hardest to escape. I mean, you are left with so many limited options, and
especially free runners, Trevor.
Yes,
especially free runners. Because so let me add this real quick. Here's why I want to explain to people why that is. If a guy's coming at me unblocked, I have to make him miss. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. If I'm Riley Leonard. If a guy's being blocked, if Rocco Spindler just gets beat in the A gap, but he's got a body and he's riding and he's trying, I know he's here, defender's there. I'm stepping to my right and I'm either climbing the pocket or I'm sliding right, throwing, or I'm sliding right, taking off. I can move around your block. I see the leverage you have as a blocker, and I now move off of that leverage. If Anthony Knapp is getting beat around the outside, but he's still got a hand on a guy, I just know I need to climb the pocket and throw the football. I'm good there. If he gets beat inside a gap, but he still has a body on him, I can slide left and either take off running or reset my feet and throw the football. If a guy's coming at me as a free runner, it's a lot harder for me to know where to go. It just is. And oftentimes, even if I make that guy miss, a lot of times the offensive lineman that's getting beat then runs into you because he's in chase mode, right? So that's what I'm saying is, like, to your point, it's the free runners. That's the thing, is like the free runners has got to stop with this. And especially, Trevor, to your point, when they're coming up the middle, it's a problem. I just wanted to add, please continue from where you were, but I just wanted to make sure people understood that part of it and why that is harder for a quarterback.
Yeah. Well, and Riley has shown that he can make plays if there's still a guy with a hand on a body. I mean, in the first quarter, they had almost a very similar situation to what you were describing, and he got pressure off the left side. Knapp still had a body on a body. Riley Leonard was able to climb the pocket, roll out left, reset his feet, finds Jaden Greathouse on the sideline down the field for a first down. So Leonard is able to make plays. If the pocket protection is not picture perfect, he's doing a better job so far as the year progresses of keeping his eyes down the field when he leaves the pocket. But you have to eliminate the free rushers. One of the biggest gripes that people have had is the lack of play action, which I am one of those people, was before I sat down and started really digging deep into, like, why? Because there's no way that Mike Denbrock is like, we're just not going to use it. I just don't believe that. And play action is a long developing play. If Riley Leonard can't just in the shotgun, clap, catch, snap, plant his feet, and go without getting hit, play action is not working. You're not going to have the time. Riley Leonard wouldn't even have the time to get the ball out of the gut of the running back before he's getting hit, realistically. So for the people out there, and I was one of those people that were like, well, there's no play action, and Notre Dame's a run-heavy team. Why are you not using play action? Those things are true. But in order to be able to run play action successfully, you need more than a half a second to throw the football. So the key to the passing game, one of the keys to the passing game being opened up, starts up front. It has to. And that's going to slow down Riley Leonard's read progression, not slow it down to where he can't get through it, but slow it down enough to where he's not rushing his reads. Plays can be developed farther down the field, which then you have to start, you factor in Bo Collins across the middle of the field. Chris Mitchell, we've seen across the middle of the field on deep dig routes before. Mitchell Evans, we've seen across the field. So going to be interested to see how the offensive line adjusts. Doesn't look like there's been a change in the starting lineup. I know there was some speculation about that on the boards and on different shows that we've had throughout the last couple of weeks.
Not speculation as much as wishful thinking.
Sure.
Hoping that maybe something would be done personnel-wise. But, yeah, at least from a depth chart standpoint, I always tell people don't put too much into a depth chart. But at least from a depth point standpoint, it doesn't look like they're going to make any personnel changes.
Yep, agreed. But it starts up front. And Riley Leonard needs better pass protection if this passing game is going to open up, and that's where it starts for sure.
So can we talk about you mentioned the lack of drop back throwing? Okay, so I want to put some data to what you said, because you said that Mike Denbrock doesn't sit there and say like, "Hey, we don't need to." What was it you said? He doesn't say what?
Right. Mike Denbrock's not sitting in the film room saying we're just not going to run play action. Right.
So let me tell you what the looking at this is according to Pro Football Focus. They break down pass plays by it's basically play action, no play action, screen, no screen, that type of thing. In 2021, Mike Denbrock, starting quarterback, averaged 8 play action passes a game. In 2021, he averaged 7 play action passes a game. This is with a team that ran the football a decent amount. In 2022 at LSU, they averaged 5.1 dropbacks per game. That rose to 5.8 last year, despite having a team that didn't really have a great running game from the running backs. They had a great running game from the quarterback, but not the running backs. So far this season, Notre Dame is averaging 3.2 dropbacks per game with Riley Leonard. Why? It's because of what you said, Trevor. It's because play action requires a level of protection that they're not giving. And it's not just the line. The tight ends have been awful in pass pro and play action as well. And so that's a big part of that is like Jared Parker's decision not to run play action last year against Clemson was just like one of the weirdest things I've ever heard in my life. Well, they're playing a lot of man coverage. What? Like I've been around football a long time. I've designed and called several play action passes against man coverage. I've never been in they're playing man, so you can't run play action. I've heard, hey, we don't want to run that concept because of this coverage. That's fine, but we can't do play action. I was like, what the heck is that all about? So the reason is you're not doing a good enough job protecting the quarterback. It's simple as that. And so that's why I say a lot of things open up if the pass protection gets better. There's things you can't call as a coach that because of the play action. Like, hey, I love double post, but if I can't protect the quarterback and if I'm getting pressure up the middle, I can't call double posts because if my quarterback gets hit, ball's floating up in the middle of the air, right down the middle of the field, it's picked off. You want to know why Notre Dame's pass game is almost exclusively to the perimeter? It's because if there's pressure, I'm not going to get damaged as much. I got to throw the ball outside. It's hard to throw the ball over the middle of the field when you're getting pressure, especially pressure up the middle, Trevor, because A, I can't step into the throw that way. And B, if I get hit when the ball's like the quick game throw to Bo Collins as an out cut, he gets hit, ball's behind him, it falls incomplete. Try doing that on an in cut, and all of a sudden the ball floats up in the air, and a D tackle picks it off, or a linebacker picks it off, or it sails the intended target, and it gets intercepted, and then it's like, oh, Riley Leonard sucks. Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of guys suck when they're getting drilled in the face as they're trying to throw the football, right? That's the key. If that gets better, everything else gets better, and you start seeing some things adjust. That's the key. That's why it's so important. And again, if they think Anthony Knapp's the best left tackle, okay, let's roll. Let's hope that you guys are right. Now get him get him ready. I don't want to hear stuff about, well, Rocco. Then don't put him in those one-on-one situations against better athletes. Set your protection to where you're doing different things. That's my thing, is fix the protection, fix the scheme, make sure guys know what they're doing. If that's all that they improve, the pass game will improve. Is it going to look like 2019 LSU? No. It'll look like a quarter's worth of 2019 LSU maybe, but it's about efficiency and explosiveness. I don't care if they only throw the ball 18 times a game or 35 times a game. Be efficient and explosive. And so far this season in the pass game, they've been neither of those things. They're neither efficient nor explosive. And that just can't continue. The 7 teams you play, if your defense has one bad day and you keep playing on offense the way you have, you're going to get beat again. That's it. And here's the thing. If the pass for all the anti-Riley Leonard people, here's my point to you. If Riley Leonard can't get comfortable in the pocket, none of the other quarterbacks are going to be comfortable in the pocket. He saved you several sacks so far this season. If they can clean up the pass pro and Riley Leonard then doesn't improve, then you can sit down as a coaching staff and say, hey, listen, maybe do we need to make a change? So even if you're a Riley ain't the guy person, okay, whatever. I'm not going to my stance. Let's see, I still think he's the best guy right now, for now. But if a lot of it, just because the O-line, if the O-line the next 3 games is lighting the world on fire, the pass pro's gotten way better, they're protecting the quarterback, and Riley doesn't improve, then you can start having a conversation of, okay, should we put Steve in the game? Should we put Kenny in the game? Should we put CJ in the game? Because then you say, okay, I at least am comfortable enough that the pass protection can give them enough time to then improve the production in the pass game if you don't think Riley can do it, right? That's fair. So if it does get better and he doesn't get better, then we can have that conversation. But right now, with the way the protection is, even if you wanted to bench Riley Leonard, you'd be a fool to do so. I pointed out, Riley Leonard's played what? He's played, 4 full games, 16 quarters. He's basically played 18 quarters of football this year. He's been sacked twice. Steve Angeli's played 3 quarters of football this year. He's been sacked 3 times. They're different players. Kenny Minchie would probably get sacked a couple times too. He's a little bit more of a runner. He's a little bit more mobile than Steve, but Steve Angeli's not a bad athlete. He's just a pocket passer. And same with CJ Carr. They may escape a couple, but they're still going to get sacked more. And this offense can't afford to play behind the chains.
100%.
And so it's just everything hinges around this. Pass pro, O-line, you've got to get going. I think if they can do that, Trevor, I'm going to feel a lot better about this offense coming. It's not going to be a light the world on fire, score 45 points a game. But with this defense, it doesn't have to be. That's the point. It doesn't have to be. If they're scoring legitimately 28 points, and if you were to tell me Notre Dame's going to score 28, just 28 points in their next 7 games, I'll probably say, okay, I think they'll probably go undefeated. I mean, if they only scored 25 points in the first 5 games, they'd be undefeated. If they scored just 25 points in every single game, 25 in the opener, 25. Well, they won a game already scoring 23. Mm-hmm. They won another game scoring 28 where they won by 25. They held another opponent to 3 points. I mean, they literally could have beat 2 opponents this year by scoring 6 points. Right? They needed 17 against Northern Illinois. That's it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? They only needed 25 against Louisville to win that game, right? So you don't have to be a 40-point per game score. I've given up on them being what I thought they could be coming in the season. They're not going to be that team because of there's a lot of reasons why, but they're just not going to be that team. But you don't have to be. You just got to be better than what you are now, more efficient, and be able to create some explosive with who you are now. And that's going to be the key. And if they can't do it this weekend, Trevor, then I just don't know when that happens. That's the reality of it. Last thing on that is, if all the other parts around him improve, they're going to need Riley Leonard to get more comfortable sitting in the pocket and making plays.
Yep.
In my opinion. So he can't, yes, you got to get all that, but he's going to have to eventually, okay, if they give you the time, if the receivers do their job, now it's up to you to get the ball where it needs to go to. And at times he's done that. At times he hasn't. Right? I mean, some of the mistakes he's made are not on the offensive line. right? That's on him. So he's going to have to continue to clean that stuff up as well. So we'll see if they're able to do that, but that's kind of where they are their offense. Because if they do that, I have no doubt that Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price are going to keep balling. And I like to convince myself that Mitchell Evans is eventually going to figure it out, and get going. Receivers are going to hopefully come out of this reinvigorated, all those things you hope. Now it's up to the trigger man to get the ball where it needs to go to. And if Riley Leonard plays well, this team is in the throwing game. This team will be impossible to beat in the next seven games. Because if he's throwing well, that means all those other things are going. Riley can't throw well if the O-line's not playing better, if the receivers aren't doing their job. You get what I'm saying? Like, if Riley Leonard is a more effective passer the next 7 games and all that goes with that, I don't know that this team is going to lose another regular season game. It may not be good enough to beat Texas and Ohio State, without a much bigger jump, but at least the next 7 games, they're going to be tough to beat, in my opinion.
100%. Riley Leonard doesn't have to be a guy week over week where every throw is fitting it into the tightest possible window in coverage and putting 42-yard throws on the money every single time. He just has to be a consistent facilitator of the football. He just needs to execute the plays when they are given to him, because he has shown that he is inconsistent with the layups, right? He has shown that he can push the ball down the field, and then he's also shown spurts where he can't. So for Riley, him taking that next step is just that level of consistency of when he does get the time and when he does get the pass protection and sees an open receiver. 1, he's willing to pull the trigger on it. And 2, just execute. Just get the ball where it needs to go. Don't drill it into the dirt. Don't sail it 5 yards over a receiver's head. So all of those combined. But again, like we've said, Riley Leonard doesn't have to go out and be Joe Burrow and be Baker Mayfield. But if those things can start to get cleaned up, Notre Dame's going to be a really hard offense to stop.
So, Trevor, that's going to do it for our offensive breakdown for this part of it. We're going to get into the defense next, because that's a little bit of a different conversation. And it's going to be very fascinating to dive into that. But before we do, folks, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. You know what? Actually, time out a second. We're not doing a mailbag, but I do think there was a question that was brought up that we're saying these things about get better, get better, get better. And Michael Johnson asked a question. He says, if the O-line and tight ends play better this weekend, what would that look like? I actually think that's a pretty good question to address before we move on to the defense, Trevor. And I'll tell you what it's like for me. What it comes down to is, in early downs, Riley Leonard's able to get through his drop and be able to throw in rhythm. The O-line playing better doesn't mean Riley sits there, looks right, looks left, comes back to the right, and he's able to throw the ball. Or he looks right, looks left, nothing's open. Then he's got to scramble like, oh, freaking O-line, come on. No, that's on you as a skill player. Either guys weren't getting open or you didn't pull the trigger and make the right read, right? So it's number one, it starts with that. He's able to get to his drops, gather, whether it's hit and throw quick game or gather, step, throw down the field, get his depth, allow the deeper routes to kind of get open, get the ball out into those spaces, those type of things where he's able to get into a rhythm throwing the football. That's number one. For Riley, it then comes down to, if he's playing better, he's making better decisions pre-snap, number one, and then going through his progressions like he did against Miami. If Riley Leonard gets time to throw and mentally plays the way he did against Miami, this offense will be scary good. Scary good. Now, they weren't against Miami for a whole lot of reasons, right? But you had drops, you had different things that went on. If that part of the game matches the other parts, then you're going to be pretty good. And then do it consistently. So I thought, and when I say meant, I mean making your reads. Now, there were still times where I need to see him not miss easy throws. Don't miss the layups, as people like to say.
Right.
If he doesn't do that, we're having a different conversation, I believe, about his throwing ability, because we'd have seen he did some pretty good things against Purdue. You know, he hit some deep shots against Miami. If you take away those just bad misses early in the game and a couple of again, pre-snap reads where, look, you got to go with that read and get the ball out. It's not about hey, man, I need you to hit 37 bombs. It's when that 5-yard speed out is wide open, you got to see it and hit it and let that guy go to work. And then the final piece is this Mike Denbrock shows enough confidence in his line and his quarterback to then dial up some shots. I'm watching every team in college football this weekend just throw go balls and give their guys chances to make plays. And I'm like, you're telling me that Notre Dame doesn't have good enough receivers to do, like, no one on this roster is good enough to do things that I see teams like Arkansas and SMU and I mean, teams that are just like not even great teams making plays. And I'm like, no, none of Notre Dame's guys can do that. Really? None of them. So there's a clear lack of confidence in the pass game from not just the players, but also the coaches. And so I think it'd be, if there's confidence in the O-line, there's confidence in Riley being able to go through his progressions, then you're going to see a more aggressive pass attack that's geared towards, let's design guys open for big play opportunities, where right now Mike Denbrock's entire game plan is designed on getting guys free in the quick game to move the chains. That's the extent of it. We've seen a couple design big plays. We saw the one against Louisville late in the game, right, that put that game away on the slot fade, where they did the motion and the pivot route, and then that got the coverage down and they run it behind it. Some things like that. If he's and the reason we don't see Mike Denbrock do a lot of that, which he did a lot of at Cincinnati, he did a lot of that at LSU, it's because he doesn't think he can protect his quarterback, and he's not, and I don't know that he's confident that the quarterback will get the ball out on time. So the offensive pass game getting going is protection wise, you're good. Riley's going through his progressions relatively well, and Mike Denbrock has enough confidence in his entire unit to say, okay, let's be more aggressive. And so you want to talk about what it would look like. You know, it's a 65 to 68% completion percentage. That also includes 4 or 5 aggressive throws down the field. Now, that's not go ball. It can be go balls. It can be backside digs. It can be corner routes, just more aggressive throwing the ball down the field in different ways. Maybe some deep climb routes where you're trying to, clear out with your backside and then bring that guy over top of the linebackers, whatever. Those are more aggressive shots that you can't run if you don't think you can have more than 2 seconds to throw the football. You can't call those plays. And the other part of it is, if they fix those things, Riley's got to show the confidence in the line as well. He's got to have more confidence that the line's going to give him time if they do it, and not rush and still think you're having those struggles. And so you'll see a team that's 65 to 68% completions, and you're going to see that yards per attempt go from like 5 to 6, which what it is now, to more close to 8 to 9 yards per attempt. That's when you know this offense has figured out the pass game. And I don't know, that may be 195 yards passing. It may be 295 yards passing. It may be 395 yards passing. But it's not so much about the total yards for me. It's about the aggressiveness and the ability to kind of create a couple. They don't need to make 5, 6 big passing plays a game. If they hit 2 or 3, defenses are like, okay, now what do we do?
Right.
Because they're hitting bombs, and now we're trying to stop the run game, and they're hitting bombs over it. I've said this, when Brandon Wimbush threw that post route over the top of the head of USC on that first touchdown drive, and then the very next drive comes down and throws an outside go ball back shoulder to Kevin Stepherson, USC quit. They said, how the heck are we going to beat this team when they're throwing the ball down the field? Like, the whole thing we thought is like, we don't have to worry about the pass game. We just got to stop the run game. And they turned everything into stopping the run game. And Notre Dame hit them with those 2 balls over the top, and you're just like, they ran a reverse to Kevin Stepherson in that game too, if you remember correctly. And all of a sudden, USC's like, okay, we put all of our resources into stopping the run, and they're throwing the ball over our head for big plays. They quit. How do you defend that team? Miami dared them and said, hey, we're going to dare you to throw the ball downfield. And Brandon misses equanimous on that post route, falls incomplete. Miami said, see, he can't throw the ball downfield on us. So then they just kept putting all their resources stopping the run, and Notre Dame never made them pay for it. You don't have to do it a whole lot. You hit a couple big ones early, and all of a sudden that team's like, oh, God, it's going to be a long day. Because this team that we didn't think could throw and is built on running the ball is now throwing the ball over our head for big plays. I don't know what the answer is now. That's what it looks like. So, Michael, that's a great conversation. And you know what? Honestly, we should have brought that up. Michael's numbers, he said 15 to 25 for 250, 3 touchdowns. I mean, if Riley Leonard does that in this game, I'll be happy. Yeah. I'm not going to be like, hey, let's get our national championship rings fitted, because this is a bad pass defense. Yeah. But it would be a good sign. And now if you can build on that against Georgia Tech and Navy, now you might feel like, okay, it's there. But it's at least a step in the right direction. That's what we said is, you have to look at it and say, okay, how, like, they just got to take that step. They got to take that step.
Mm-hmm.
And if they can do that, then I think they'll going to be pretty dangerous, Trevor. So that's, Michael, that's a great question. And honestly, that's my fault. We should have probably talked about that. Should have been part of the conversation, Michael. So appreciate you saying that. But yeah, for me, Trevor, that's what it looks like. And I kept seeing you shake your head. Yes. So I feel like we're on the same page. Like, it's not so much about throwing for 350 yards. It's about just how the operation of what it looks like and how it's going, and the protection and the reads. And then that allows Mike Denbrock to be more aggressive with what he's calling.
Yeah, 100%. I don't have much more to add. The only thing that I will say is improved offensive line and tight end play. Notre Dame's percentage of converting third downs goes up significantly. Right now, they're the 103rd ranked team in the country in converting third downs at 35%. You start getting tight ends involved. You get the offensive line with better pass protection, tight ends with better pass protection, get them more involved in the passing game. I think that number starts to increase significantly.